Hey guys, thanks for joining me on this journey here today. On this episode here, I have Kara Fernstrom. Kara, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. How are you today, Brian?
I'm a bit nervous, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm glad to have you on. I honestly taking a listen to your podcast. I'm really into it, really into it, because the guests you have on, they're as I've said before, it's like you took someone from Harvard and you're just like, come on my podcast, and there's a vast, there's a lot of options to go into your podcast, and it's like I wish I've got into it more, but this podcast that I'm talking about is the Conquest of Bliss. How did you? Let's start out. How did you start this idea? How did it come about, and how did you start taking action upon this idea?
That's a really good question, and one that I will try to be succinct when I answer it, but it's a little bit long. So, my life has been kind of up and down. Sorry about that. A bit more down than up for quite a while. So, I had a lot of struggles and stuff. And one of the things that I noticed was that there's not a lot of easily accessible resources out there for people who are seeking tools for well-being and happiness as kind of a concept. But that's kind of an aside because I didn't really know yet what I was doing. And so, long story short, I ended up sick with chronic illness, which we can talk about more if you want or not. It's okay. And couldn't work anymore. And so I was unable to work. And I started this art business, Artstrom. And I I did really well. I was really surprised and I had a lot of support and people just kind of accepted that I was an artist. And at the same time as this, the reason that's relevant is because it gave me confidence that I could actually just create positions for myself in the world and that the world would accept me as exactly who I said I was. And so that was really cool. And at the same time, I was just studying so much about like philosophy and psychology and basically anything that was sort of adjacent to behavioral sciences and just consuming as much information as I could. And as this was happening, a lot of people would come to me on an individual level and ask me for advice. Sorry, I've got a bit of a catch in my throat.
No
um,
worries.
they would they would come to me for advice and ask me my opinions on things, like even like when I was single and like chronically single for a long time, not now but long time. People would come to me for relationship advice and I feel like I'm a bad person to ask that to. But and then so things were kind of snowballing and I decided I was going to write a book. And I called it The Conquest of Bliss, but and so I wrote the book, but the editing never really finished. My mom was supposed to edit it and she just didn't, which is okay. And I could have taken it to other editors, but it really felt like, interestingly enough, like I'd written that book just for my mom. Like in that moment, like, like kind of kismet, like I just felt like, hey, maybe I did all that work for her and didn't realize that because I didn't want to write a book. I didn't want something that was static and that kind of felt complete and like it represented a whole thought pattern when the reality of the situation was I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly seeing different perspectives. And so I wanted something that would be dynamic and to flow. And then the other side of it was that a book was just me and my experience, and that's it. And if there's one thing that I know, it's that my experience is not universal. So my book would have helped anybody that was exactly like me, and no one else. And so I thought about it a lot and I was running out of energy, from talking to so many individuals. And so I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll do a podcast, a vlog, or a blog. And so I just posted that on my Facebook and people were overwhelmingly like, do a podcast. I'll listen to it if you do a podcast, do a podcast, do a podcast. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing a podcast. And then that week, I went on and I was very inspired by the positive over like the overwhelmingly positive response. And it just felt like it was right. And worth noting that two previous times I had been in discussions with someone about co-hosting a podcast and it just kind of fell through, which is a really common experience for podcasters who try to do the co-host route. And so I just kind of dove in. I went to freemusicarchive.org or .com or something and found a song and I mixed it into an intro. So like I don't know how much you know about audio editing, but I
Very
like
little.
me too. But I mixed it into to an intro because I knew a little bit from dating musicians and stuff, and mixed it into an intro for my show. And then I just started recording on a Microsoft Surface tablet and a $30 mic, which is why my first couple of episodes sound like they were recorded on a Microsoft Surface tablet. And yeah, I just kind of started. And then partway through, an editor came in and like I just kept recording episodes and just reaching out to people that I knew or people that I didn't know who I thought might be interested. And like before you know it, like I was having guests that were, semi-famous rock stars or guests that were, professionals in their field, like psychologists and stuff like that. And it just kind of kept going. And then I would get feedback about, someone told me that it helped them to not self-harm. Someone told me that it helped them to decide to try and fix their relationship with their mother. I've gotten feedback that it's changed people's lives. And so I just keep going. And that's the basic story. Do you have any questions? Because I feel like I just kind of rushed right over everything.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. I actually love that response you gave. It's really in depth. Like, there's a lot that I could, ask about it. So, it's funny that you said you dated like some audio type people or musicians. You said that, so I guess
Yeah.
that came in handy for this podcasting stuff. But this book, you said you were going to give this to your mom, but you also said you wanted her to edit it. What?
Well, okay, so I'll clarify. So I wrote this book. It was called The Conquest of Bliss, and it was sort of autobiographical. Um, because like I've had a weird life. Let's just say a weird life. So it was this autobiography slash sort of self-help ish, like not so much self-help, but like more like philosophy. So autobiographical philosophy book. And the original plan was for my mom to edit it, at least first run editing,
Mhm.
before I would submit it to any publishers, or self-pub. Or we didn't really have a plan after that. The first step was for my mom to edit it. And then my mom started reading it and she found herself unable to edit it. She read it, but it was very emotional for her. She didn't realize how much of my experience was the way that it was. And it was just something, and so like I said, down the road, as it wasn't getting edited, I found that my mind, I don't know how to explain it, but I found that I wasn't worried about it not getting edited. I wasn't desiring for her to do better or to edit it or whatever. I realized that I think that the reason I wrote it sort of in a universal way, like a karmic way, is for my mom to read it and not necessarily for the world to read it. I didn't know that when I was doing it, but I'd given it to her to edit and she did read it, but never edited it. And I think that that was kind of like not on purpose, but what was supposed to happen.
Yeah, so it kind of just made sense. You said, okay, I didn't really care about this book getting published because the purpose was for my mom to read it, and she did read it, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I didn't at the time, like I didn't write it for my mom. It wasn't until later that I realized that maybe the only person who needed to read it was my mom.
Okay.
I
Hmm.
know that that doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense, but like I'm just saying that sometimes things don't work out and sometimes they do work out, but only because we change our expectations of them.
You get it. You get it. So that's very fascinating. And then with this podcast, so you were like, I don't want it to be like, let's say for this example, a rock. I want it to be like dough. I want it to, continually change form or make it into a piece of art. Considering you're an artist, you wanted this to like be morphed around, make it something beautiful, have others contribute to this work of art as well. And you said you literally just got started on a tablet and then a mic that's $30. So you just went into it.
Yeah, which was not what I would recommend to podcasters who seek my advice, but it worked out well in my case.
See, that's what I did. I legit just got a headset, a gaming headset. Or actually, I legit, for real, first episode, just the computer. That's it. Nothing else. And then I got the headset, and then doing a little bit of research, I had to get the mic. I had to, because it all sounded shitty, but it sounded well enough that you could hear the points. But
And
the.
I was just saying my mic was actually a gift from a patron.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Thanks, Patrick. Um
But your podcast, like your first episode, you did say it doesn't sound the best, but then to go to the next episode, it's like, wow, she really improved the quality and the way you speak as well. It changes drastically. Well, not drastically. It's like little subtle things here and there, and it's really
mhm.
cool. And I love seeing that with the podcasting or people in general. It's just seeing those little minor changes. It's like, oh my god, that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's really it is a fascinating thing. Like I definitely had a lot of not great habits in the beginning. I said a lot more, and then I tried to edit out the ums, which I feel like was a huge mistake on my part. Uh, and like I learned things like if I'm gonna laugh, I should move away from the mic. I shouldn't move away from the mic if I'm in the middle of a sentence. Yeah, I learned if I need to clear my throat, I'll mute it instead of causing extra stuff to be edited out, things like that. But yeah, for sure, just like the way I speak and the way that I learn to relate to people, my interview skills have all changed dramatically. Um,
Love
yeah.
that. And I'm actually like in this episode during the shoot too. I'm like getting some pointers too, like laughing back and this and that. I'm still trying to figure out the mic placement for my end, but I mean it's a learning process, and eventually I'll get to like your point, but on my level, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, I've been very lucky that I've had a lot of advice and mentorship from much bigger podcasts than my own. Um, so like there's just been so much. Like the laughing back thing especially applies for me because I have a really loud laugh. Not everyone's got that. One piece of advice that was given to me is basically be as close to the mic as you can. And the reason for that is because the ambient sound, like the sound in the background, will be less loud compared to your voice and therefore less difficult to edit in post.
Hmm.
Right. So, like, better to have the mic capture your voice close up than to have it try to capture it further away, because if you're further away, then your voice sort of blends into the background noise and it becomes difficult to distinguish it in post.
Okay. And now this is like I guess a me type question. Have you ever had like a podcast where someone was just like on a Zoom call like we are now, and they had no equipment?
I have. I try to avoid that when I invite people onto my show. I've gotten tips from my editor slash producer, Keldy, as well as other people for reducing those kinds of problems. So, for example, Keldy told me that it is better to have someone have like the headphones that come with your phone than nothing, right? So I try to make sure that I ask people to do that ahead of time. And if they can't, you can still make it work. It's just not going to be as good of audio. And I think that that's one of the things that's helped me a lot too, is realizing that it's not always going to be perfect. In my opinion, like quality is super important. Content is more important because you can have the best audio in the world, and if you don't have interview skills, or the guest isn't interesting, or you don't have basic ground rules, then people aren't going to listen because they care about the content more.
I love that. I really love that. So I guess because I told you before, there was this like one dude who commented on the video with like the video off and the audio off, and he was like, I didn't care. So just hearing you cement that, it just like gives me this like serene feeling of like it's okay. Just not everyone's gonna like it. Just have fun, and if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, I mean, it's bad to some, but as long as I like it or the person shooting it likes it, it works out well.
Yeah, and I mean it does, like, of course that doesn't mean don't focus on quality where you can, but like I said, the most important thing is going to be the content. Like, is what you're doing adding value to the community or to the audience? Because people won't engage with things that they don't feel add value, or if they do engage, they engage in a way that is not what you're looking for, you know?
And that's what I'm trying to get at too. Like, not only do I just want to know about you, but I also want like little gold nuggets that I can get out of people. And you've already blessed me with nuggets here and there. Hopefully, the people that are watching can, utilize this knowledge as well. But like, it's it's a great feeling because everyone has like this information, or like they have their own experience, and to hear it from their perspective, it's like, yes, let me hear it from your words. I want to hear you. Let me make you feel appreciated. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
You're very good at that. You're very good at that. This whole experience has made me feel much cooler than I normally feel like I am. Uh, so, do you have any more questions about anything?
So, before I ask my next question, you do have this
Mhm.
like pink flower energy. It's like subtle, and it's like it's nice. Like, it's hard to explain a flower because to each their own. Like, everyone has their own kind of favorite flower, I guess. But I see you as like this pink flower type energy, so it's nice.
Oh, that's very sweet. I've heard that my name tastes, or yeah, tastes pink.
What?
I don't know. Someone who has synesthesia was explaining to me
Huh?
um, how they hear and taste my name.
That's um. I've never heard that before, but so with your podcast having all these high caliber people, and I didn't know you had like semi-famous rock stars and whatnot. Like, how do you obtain these people on your guests? Do you like go the route I did and go on Reddit, or what do you do?
Generally, no. I'm actually having some issues with a site because it's got like an open call for my show, and I'm not trying to do that. Um, but generally, no. For the most part, gosh, this is a great question, and a question that I get a lot because I seem to have a lot less trouble with guests than most podcasters. The first thing I usually do is I look to my network. I look to who am I connected with, um, that may be interested in contributing to my show. And so that part's really simple, right? Because like I have been good at networking for quite some time. It's sort of one of my favorite things to do is I just like people and I like to learn about people and understand people. And so naturally I have a relatively significant network. Um, so beyond that though, the biggest thing I do is like when I'm reading online, oh, I am getting the glare. Oh gosh. When I'm reading online and stuff like that, I specifically like keep in mind, can this person add value to my audience and can I add value to this person? Right. So if I read an article, like I've had a man from Medium, a fantastic human being. His name's Floris Coot, Coots. God, I can't remember his last name. God,
I
but
don't
he's
know the
very cool.
guy.
Anyways, he was very cool and he was talking about living a playful life. I read his article. I thought this was really cool. And so all I did was I just reached out to him and I said, hey, I saw your media article on medium.com. Loved what you talked about. Loved this specifically. Was wondering if you want to come on a show, the Conquest of Bliss podcast, and talk about this. I can't offer anything in the way of monetary value, but you can plug your show. And, like it depends on who it is. Um, but I'm realistic about what I'm offering. Or sometimes I'm asking a favor and I try to approach that humbly and say, I think that you would add value to my audience and I would appreciate it if you help, if you're up to it. If not, no big deal. Right. And I just try to approach people that way, whether I find them randomly online or they write a book that I like, or like I mean I've also like the neuroscientist, I just found him on Quora of all things, like the
Oh,
questions thing, and emailed him. I mean the big thing is be bold, trust that there is value in giving people a platform, and remember that they're helping give me content, so I need to approach it with humility and kindness. And I don't get everybody that I ask. I actually emailed a local university and was like, does anyone in your neuroscience department want to come on? And they just never responded. Um, so instead, I got a neuroscientist from like the other side of a different country.
okay. Look at you.
but but yeah, like I said, it's just about believing that there's value in the platform, believing that there's value, like basically approaching it like win-win-win, and trying to do that in every scenario, and just constantly being mindful. I mean, for your show, all you have to ask is who's interesting. And I think the answer is a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Um, and then like, I mean, people are often humbled when you approach them with kindness and humility and ask them to help you. People are often excited and humbled, and people want to be heard. So, if you treat people that way and be bold enough to reach out, you'd be surprised how good a result you can get.
Dude, I really love that. Like, just hearing you say it out loud, it's like, don't stress too much. It's like, not everyone's going to want to be on it. And hearing you say that, it's like, it's okay. We've all
Yeah,
gone through it. It's not a big deal. There's always more interesting people out there, or not more interesting. You know
there's
what I
there's
mean.
more in the sense that there are more of them, not that they are more interesting. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So, uh, see, I
Well,
told you
and I
I'd do
mean,
this.
if it helps you, like my one of my best friends, actually two of my best friends have never been on my show in spite of being asked. And even more, like most of the close, well, not most of the closest, my mom and dad have both been on, but like my brothers haven't been on the show. Lots of people haven't. Lots of people have said no or not right now. And I just trust that if they say not right now, there's wisdom in it. And then it doesn't feel quite so much like rejection.
Hmm, I like that. I've also learned in like sales that no means not yet. Just hit me up later again.
Sales does say that. I don't like it. I don't like sales.
But man,
I used to do sales too.
I feel like we've all done sales. I'm just being real. Like everyone I've met, they've done sales to a certain extent, whether it's like a pyramid scheme, LMLM, or like doing cars, any kind of sales. They just get into it. Like that's a funny thing.
Yeah, it's very alluring.
Sorry about that.
All good.
But man, you are interesting. Like,
Thank you.
so with all of these like guests coming on and all of these, you know, different topics, you've obviously gained a lot of insight, but have you gained a lot of friends or connections?
Oh, those are two different questions, I think. Um, so connections, absolutely. And I would say friends, I not everybody that I work with becomes a friend. Um, but a lot do. And I find that like it just depends, right? Like I have this thing where I definitely am really, really cautious about not assuming that I'm owed friendship or
Oh, okay.
relationship and stuff. And so some people who I've connected with in work, it's blossomed into friends as long as they're respectful of the fact that I get very, very busy and cannot like just in general, because like between the chronic illness and the podcasting and the art, and the fact that I also have a regular life like everybody else,
Of course.
um, I just don't have the time to maintain the level of friendship that a lot of people want. So unfortunately, a lot of people fade away because they are hoping for more from me than I can possibly give them. But the people who understand that my lack of time doesn't diminish my love and my care, I usually end up making, lasting, beautiful friendships with, whether I meet them in work or otherwise.
I love that. That's really nice, especially how you worded it too. Like it ends off very nicely. But you mentioned this you being an artist. What kind of artist are you?
I do. I always say graphic design, but it's probably a little bit inaccurate. I'm a digital artist, so I do graphic design stuff like I can make infographics, and I've done logos for different companies and stuff. Small companies, probably ones that you haven't heard of. And then obviously my own logo, and I've got other logos and stuff too. And then portraiture, like digital portraiture. Um, I've done all sorts of stuff, animation, 2D animation. Yeah, so there's that kind of stuff, mostly centered around drawing. But then, like in a non-professional sense, I also do just like miniature making and all sorts of. Oh, I don't have anything in here I can show you, but all sorts of art. Really, I just love to create, love to connect, love to create.
That's nice. And a real quick question. So I saw your podcast start out with like this brain and then a
Yes,
rose, and then to
yeah.
that, what happened?
Okay, so both of those are drawings of mine. And so remember the whole I'm rushing to start a podcast situation, right?
Yeah.
So I went against any advice that I would give people now and just jumped into things without thinking about things too much. And so that was a drawing that I had done for like Inktober the previous year. I don't know if you've ever heard of Inktober. Okay, it's just like a drawing challenge or an art challenge where you draw one day, once a day, one full drawing every day for October. And I think I got like 6 days in. And so I'd done this drawing and I was like, oh, that'll work. And so I went in and I adjusted the colors and everything. And I used that as my logo, which was fine in the beginning. But then sometime, I'm not even sure when, but at some point, excuse me, I took I kind of took stock of where I was at with the show and decided that I wanted to at least try to take it more serious. Not that I wasn't taking it seriously, but be more professional. And one of the things that stuck in my mind, because I do, I've never like been college educated, but I have done some education around design and business and all sorts of stuff like that. And one of the things that I know about logos is that a logo should be, or ideally, a logo is something that almost anyone can draw and that people will recognize immediately. So it's basically the concept of making it an icon, right? So if you think of the McDonald's arches or the Pepsi logo, you can see those in pretty much any color and you still recognize them.
Right.
You can also draw them yourself. Your kid brother, if you've got one, could draw it himself. It's about basically, like, I don't know what the term is, but I want to say like virality, like making it something that can spread, that has potential to spread, something that people might doodle, people will recognize at a glance and don't have to look closely at. And so I was thinking about that. And so this was also a drawing that I had done just casually because I just like to draw. So I just draw things all the time. That's what I do. And so this was also a drawing that I had done. And I decided that it was much better suited to a logo than the brain thing. The brain one was more of cover art than it ever was a logo, right? It's not something that could be easily drawn. It's not something that could be easily like put onto a t-shirt or, so I like this because I can change the colors of it. I can adapt it slightly and it's still recognizable. I can do it in different ways and apply it in different ways. So I decided to change my cover art to include a logo, which was this one.
That's nice. um, so when you were saying that like your first logo, it's like, well, it is very intricate. Of course, a brain has all these ridges and whatnot. So, making the transition to that simpler logo, it works. Like now hearing it after what you said, like keeping a simple logo, it's like it makes sense to me. I don't even have a logo yet. Which would you recommend every podcast have a logo?
I think it really depends on podcasters' goals. So I've done a few videos actually on things to think about when you podcast, and this was one of the topics that I covered. And it really just depends on your goals. Like there are different reasons that people podcast, and so there's not really a one size fits all answer. But most people who podcast are hoping to quote unquote make it big. They're wanting to be viral. They're wanting to be known. They're wanting to be able to live off their podcasting. And if that's the case, I would absolutely recommend, if not having, like, you don't have to have a logo that's as simple as mine, but I highly recommend having aesthetics and visuals that well represent your brand so that when you move into merch, you have an easier time making merch and that it's cohesive. Basically, if you're planning on turning it into a brand, like a full on business, then yeah, you definitely want visuals that represent that.
Mm. Yeah, I've been keeping mine very simple. Like Just the thumbnail says like a quick brief like summary of what the video is about, and then a picture of the person, and that's it. I didn't put too much uh, like intricacies, artwork into all of that. But now hearing this, it's like if I do plan on doing something big with this, I guess I should start thinking of doing something more creative, something that adds like a little zest to, the pictures. So,
Yeah, it's something that's useful because then like, when you upload your videos, you can have like a little logo there so that people will see at a glance what they're listening to, stuff like that. But the nice thing is because this is just going on YouTube and it's not an RSS feed yet, you're not going to have to worry about like sort of getting everything done in the beginning like a lot of podcasters do. Because when you get an RSS feed, I think it's I want to say 2 months, but I don't remember the exact number. But like if you want to get on Apple's new and noteworthy, there's a very short window. Like if you want to be considered a new podcast and be considered for recognition within that category, you want to have all your ducks in a row right at the beginning. If you're not, like if you're starting as just a YouTuber and then eventually planning to go and upload the audio into your own feed, then you have a little bit more time to play around while you would still like before you start, because you're not going to be considered new until you've officially started.
hmm.
Like because podcasting versus YouTube videos is that podcasting is an RSS feed, which is like a universal feed that all the players draw from.
I'm learning so much about podcasting in this episode. It's like I feel like I'm doing it wrong now, to be honest with you. But like
Sorry.
no, it's okay. Like I'm learning, and like knowing that there is more to this than what I'm doing now. It's like that's amazing. It gives me more space to learn, more time to get into my craft, to be better at this, to improve the quality for my future guests. Because I that's like what I'm trying to get at right now. Like improve the quality of everything, but funds this and that, and still trying to learn and like what's best, what's not best. So there's a lot to learn. So I'm very
Yes.
grateful and thankful that you're sharing this with me. Like, oh my God. And it's a
It's a
part,
very, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, it's a part of the fun too. It's like learning something new and then implementing it and then let it go or not let it go. Make it smooth or implementing it. That's part of the fun. But you were going to say?
I was just going to say it's a very steep learning curve. So don't feel bad, unless you come from a background, like even if you came from a background in radio, it would still be challenging because a lot of what podcasters do now historically would have been done by teams of people, right? So you look super,
Like
super
teams? Like, because I see
well,
a
like,
lot of solo people.
yes. So what I mean is like, so podcasting in the popular sense is like a decade or two old, right? Not super old. Previous to that, podcasting is in the same realm of radio. So when it was radio, you were hired to be a host and you were mostly just a host, and then you had to show up for PR stuff and stuff like that, but your main function was a host. There was someone whose job was to make sure that the recordings went in cleanly. There was
Oh.
someone whose job it was to do the research. There was someone whose job it was to get guests. And like, us, there might be one person who does one or two jobs, but generally speaking, it wasn't one person walking into a radio station and organizing everything, then recording everything, and then editing it, and then releasing it, controlling distribution and promotions. That's like 8 or 10 people's jobs. So don't feel bad when you feel overwhelmed doing the job of 10 people.
I'm grateful you said that. Thank you for that. But do you have a team? Because you did say you have an editor.
So yes and no. I definitely do have an editor. Would I say that I have a team? Yes and no. As far as I have people who voluntarily help me with things on a regular basis. I have a couple people who help me with IT stuff, one who helps me with sort of the hardware side of things, and someone who helps me with sort of the software, website type stuff side of things. I have someone who helps me with promotional, like marketing advice. She doesn't actually help me with the actual marketing, but she'll give feedback on marketing materials. as well as advice to me. I have a whole bunch of people who are kind of constantly on the lookout for people who might be interesting guests, and then they give that feedback to me, and then I gauge and possibly reach out to them. A couple people even have permission to invite people onto my show, but only a couple, including my partner. And then other than that, I have Keldy, who helps me with all of my editing and gives feedback as well. So the majority of the work is on me, but I have people who supplementarily help me with little bits and bobs here and there, because it is a lot. And I also have a Patreon that has right now 4 supporters totaling, I think it's like 90 or $80 a month or something.
Okay.
So they help fund, the Podbean and all that stuff.
That's really cool. So you have people that actually want to keep you on air. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Man. So, man, I legit just came in a podcast saying like, hey, just get someone on, talk to them, post it, and then there's more, and then there's more, and then after to this episode, I'm like, there's so much more. There's a lot to do, and it's not just what I'm doing right now, but I am just getting started. I'm still learning the ropes, and I'm learning as I'm going. So,
Well, and like one of the most important things that I would advise anyone who's getting into it is to remember to be kind to yourself and okay with the fact that it's like okay with the fact that you're not going to be perfect, okay with the fact that it's going to be overwhelming sometimes, because that's probably the biggest killer of podcasts is overwhelm, is feeling like you're not good enough and you can't keep up with the Joneses, and so you quit. So like if you figure out a way to love what you're doing regardless of the results at the end, then that overwhelm feels less, because you don't have to do any of it. You can learn as you go. You don't have to do anything beyond recording and releasing. Everything else is just bonus. It's nice to have. It's how you build, yeah, but you don't have to do it immediately.
honestly, Kara, you're by far my favorite guest on this show. You're making everything seem so like you're like the pillow. Like I don't know how to like get this more clear or more concise, but you went from like a flower to now a pillow. Like it I'm so fascinated by you. You have this like subtle energy that's like soft, but you also have this like serene nature that's like take me seriously. I'm not like a pushover type thing, but and it mixed together to I guess be a pillow.
Oh, that's so funny. I I've never been described as a pillow before, but I actually think I know what you mean, where it's just like, yeah, I kind of have to be, it's a tough world out there, and things have been hard, but I refuse to let the world make me bitter.
I love that. You gotta always be you. Always, always, always. Man. So I gotta ask you again in regards to the podcast. Like, you had a lot of people on there. Has anyone like affected you? Like, they changed your point of views or
Oh,
changed you in any way?
all of them. That's what's so cool is like, I'm so fucking lucky. Oh, sorry. I don't know if there's swear words
Oh,
allowed on
you
this show.
you could go ahead. Everyone. I should have said that before, but this is funny.
Yeah, so I'm super, super lucky. I have gotten to have conversations that I never would have dreamed of having. And I have learned from pretty much all of them. I like just for some examples, like I learned a lot about the brain from the neuroscientist. Um, I learned lots about like, okay, why am I trying to think of examples? Yes, the answer is yes. I have learned a great deal of things, and it's been like, almost a year and a half, almost a year and a half. And so there's been a lot of guests, but I find that I find myself thinking about those conversations all the time. All the time. It's the best thing. I get to learn so much about not only myself, but just how the world works around me, which allows me to relate and interact better with people.
Okay, shoot. Guess I gotta have more guests on because I, I love talking to people. I love seeing their point of view. So to eventually, I guess, morph into each one of them and to be me, that sounds pretty cool. But
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that I morph into them, but I learn about them, and I learn, like, compassion comes from understanding a lot of the time, right? And so I learn how to be more compassionate, and being more compassionate is an advantage to me as well as the person I'm being compassionate to, because when you're being compassionate, you have a clearer head than when you're being angry. And so, like, it just kind of all plays into that building an ideal life thing.
and by like morph into people, I mean like you take a little piece of them and then
Oh,
not
got you,
not
got
like
you.
okay, I'm gonna be you, I'm gonna copy you, that's gonna be me, but like a tiny piece. Like Joe over here says he looks both ways crossing the street, and then a bunch of other things. I'm gonna do the look both ways, and then Johnny over here is like I tie my shoes left and right. I
I
random
get you. I
examples.
get you. Yeah, you take random pieces. You take what works and leave the rest. Yeah.
Yeah, that's even better. So it's like what resonates with yourself and just take it. I love that. So another thing is burning out, because you say doing it, and you do once a week, and I'm just starting out and literally no schedule. I'm doing it randomly kind of right now. How do you maintain like a schedule? How do you maintain this consistent flow of podcasting, if that makes sense?
I think so. So number one thing is having a schedule makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference for me. So I release on Thursdays, which will be tomorrow, but who knows what time it'll be by the time someone listens to this. So it'll be a day. It'll be Thursday. Um, I release on Thursdays, and I started out doing 2 a week actually, and then I reduced it to once a week. And I started with Tuesdays, and so I'm on the West Coast. So I was like, I have to have, or sorry, Thursdays. I have to have it done by 9 p.m. was the first rule that I had. And the reason I chose 9 p.m. was that at 9 p.m. Uh, Pacific time meant that it was still released on Thursday, even in the East, right? So as long as you were in North America, it was released on Thursday. Might be Friday if you were somewhere else, but as long as you were in North America. So that was kind of the first rule that I set for myself. And then I eventually narrowed it down to I release at 3 p.m. on Thursdays. But having that schedule made it feel less overwhelming, because it's like I need to have a show ready by X time. And I guess, okay, what I'm trying to say is that having the structure made it less overwhelming, because I have a tendency to, if I don't have a structure, if I don't know what I'm expecting of myself, then I overdo it and I work too hard and I get too much done. And then I don't have enough energy to continue that flow. So it sort of put pauses in where, because like there are some weeks where I can record like 5 or 6 or 7 episodes, and I'm like all fucking high on life, ready to go. And the next week I might be crashed and I can't do anything. So it made more sense to split it up to what was reasonable. And it did take time to learn what was reasonable for me and stuff like that. So that's the scheduling question. I can answer the burnout thing, but I want you to clarify what you want to know about it.
So see, I've noticed that about you. You talk, you're saying a point, and then you catch yourself going like away slightly, and then you're like, hold on, let me get back into it. The original question, and that's so fascinating to me. Does that like uh, before the burnout question? Does that take uh like I'm assuming that came from all the podcasting you've done, right?
It's a combination of podcasting and wanting to appear to have less ADHD symptoms than I do.
Oh,
I mean, I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but a lot of my family, or some of my family members are, and a lot of the indications point to, if I don't have ADHD, I'm right kind of on the cusp. But I was always insecure about that when I was young. So especially it's more noticeable when I got into podcasting. But in general, I try to be someone who stays on track, even if it starts to veer.
I love that. I need to work on that for sure because I do a lot of this random movements and whatnot. But you did straight earlier. That's what adds character to you, and I don't want to necessarily ruin the character that is me. But the whole burnout thing, that's I guess I'm guessing that would get alleviated by the structure and scheduling.
It does and it doesn't. It really depends. So, like I said, there's a lot to podcasting, like we discussed, and so it can like structure definitely helps. There's no question that structure helps. But the other thing that I find really, really helpful is get ahead on promotional material, get ahead on like when you do have the energy, get ahead on interviews, get ahead on promotional material, have everything ready to go so that if your body starts to tell you, even starts to tell you that you need a break, that you can take one and that you're not obligated by these commitments that you've made in your head or out loud. So if you, I mean, I try to be at least 2 episodes ahead at any given time because I really struggle with burnout being someone who has chronic illness, right? So I have chronic illness, which means that some days I can't get out of bed, which means that, me just going and fucking typing up a description and releasing it. I keep swearing. I'm so sorry. Um,
It's okay.
but even doing that can feel like more work than doing 6 weeks worth of episodes otherwise. So the big thing is, yeah, have as much structure as you can get away with and plan ahead, have a plan B so that on those days, like, you might wake up one day and be like, I don't feel like doing anything to do with podcasting at all. And so you can schedule your releases. You can plan ahead so that everything is ready to go and you can work on your own schedule according to what your body can actually handle, your mind can actually handle, your emotions can actually handle.
So with like scheduling guests, do you schedule it on their time or your time?
Bit of both. I generally speaking only do interviews for my show or other people's shows between 9 a.m. PST and like ending latest at 4 p.m. PST, Monday to Friday. And I do that because of my health issues and because of, avoiding burnout and stuff like that. Now, if there is a guest, whether it's my show or another, and there's the only option is outside of those, I do consider it, but so basically what I do is I have a Calendly, which is a scheduling app, but there's lots of kinds of scheduling apps. Oh yeah, you used my Calendly.
Yeah, first
Um,
time.
yeah, so I have Calendly and it only shows blocks of time in that frame that I gave you between 9 to 4 Monday to Friday. And so people can choose what works best for them within the parameters of my working hours, just like a regular business.
Okay. Would you recommend using Calendly?
Um, so I don't really honestly, I can't say if there are better ones or worse ones out there. I've heard really good things about Acuity as well, but I don't really know the price comparisons and stuff. I went with Calendly because it was the first one I came across and I haven't changed because it works. Um,
Whatever works.
but yeah, but it might not be the best one. So I don't want to, I would recommend automating as many of your processes as possible.
Okay. So now I gotta ask, this chronic illness, what is it? Does it affect your daily living drastically, or is it minor? What is this?
So it depends on the day. So chronic illness is just any illness that is ongoing. Um, so I have fibromyalgia, which you've probably heard of. Um, it's a chronic pain disorder. That's it's not as poorly understood as it used to be, but it's not super well understood either. A lot of evidence shows that it probably has to do with nerves and the way nerves respond and how many nerves there are and a bunch of other stuff. But it causes chronic, which again, ongoing widespread pain throughout my whole body. And then I have something called sarcoidosis, which is it's an inflammatory disease. So it causes growths of non-cancerous inflammatory cells on your organs. So it was discovered on my lungs and the lymph nodes in my chest cavity. But there's evidence that it might be in different parts of my body, but there's not really a point in getting all that. I don't want to get any more testing. So I just do my best to manage the pain. And does it affect me in my daily life? Absolutely. Does not affect, it doesn't affect everything to the point of detriment, but some days it definitely does. Some days I can't get out of bed or, function. And some days like I have no choice but to take, pretty heavy duty painkillers, and my intellect just isn't there anymore. And then some days, most days, I'm just able to manage it with, sometimes cannabis, um, sometimes other kinds of medications. Um, but yeah, there's not really any point in time that I'm not in pain. So kind of shitty, but
Girl, I'm actually genuinely spooked. Like, I'm kind of fearful after hearing that. It's like, oh man, because I kind of know what it's like to be in constant pain. I haven't, like, not to the extent of like you have it, but that's that's not fun. That's that's very saddening, actually.
that's okay. I mean, it's not great, but like it's I'm very lucky in other ways.
You are blessed for sure. You could still keep going. You could still do all the things that you're doing and podcasting, which, I'm glad I touched base on that. Has any kind of like symptoms that you've experienced like got in the way of a scheduled podcast?
Very occasionally, but I actually find it's a really interesting thing. The days there's I think maybe once I've had to change my schedule. What I find tends to happen, and I don't know why, so it feels like magic, is the days that I've woken up and I've had interviews but wasn't sure that I was going to be able to do it, the person I'm interviewing always cancels.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't have to cancel it for some reason. They've got some emergency or something happens. Even when I'm interviewing on other people's shows, like it happened not that long ago when I was on the Beer and Business podcast. Our scheduled interview, they had some stuff that they had to deal with, came up out of nowhere, and they changed it. And like my grandmother had just died and my illness was flaring up really bad. So I was like dreading, trying to fight through doing this podcast, and then they changed it. That's always what seems to happen. I can't guarantee that'll happen for other people, but for some reason, whether it's the universe got my back or whatever, but every time my illness comes to that point, the people that I'm supposed to interview always cancel.
And are they open to reschedule?
Yeah, I've never had any issues with people not
Okay.
being open to rescheduling, but again, like I've only ever had to actually do that once, and everyone else was the one doing the rescheduling, and so I didn't even have to look bad.
Huh. That's really good. That's like, I guess it makes it easy on you. Have you
Mm-hmm.
ever had to do like a whole reshoot?
Oh, once with my mom because she had really bad. So when I interviewed my mom, she had really bad audio. And then once I probably should have early on because I was interviewing the host of Let's Talk About Sex, which is the cult podcast. It's like a super, super huge cult podcast out of Australia. And I had her on my show, and we probably should have redone it because we had really bad connection, but we didn't. We just used the audio we had.
It's funny that you mentioned sex because, like, beforehand communicating, I was joking, like, hey, let's talk about sex, but none of that appeared. It's just podcasting, which
Oh, no, 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 no. Let's talk about sects.
oh,
SECTS. That's the name of her show.
okay. I'm glad you cleared it up, but that's funny. Well, I still brought it up anyways, but it's funny because, like, we kept it classy and more simple, not too out there. But I like this. Any kind of topic I enjoy talking about because we're all human. We have all experienced it. Well, I'm not certain if everyone has experienced sex, but I'm sure they're curious about what it's like. And here we go talking about it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna send you a chat here in Zoom. So it's her show.
So,
and it's about cults.
okay, nice. I'm gonna go ahead and let that do its thing. So,
Yeah, that should just show up on your screen, and then people will know that I'm clarifying. Uh, but yeah,
so
yeah, so
you obviously have a lot of information, and everyone should check out Kara's podcast for sure because there's a ton of information. Look at the titles, and you will find what you're looking for. Like whether it's like, I mean, there's a lot on there. Honestly, like I can't get too into it because I've gone through so many podcasts that I don't want to mix yours with this other person's. So
that's okay.
but there is a lot, and just like remembering some of the titles I've seen, there's like, oh man, that's for me, and then I listen to it. So anyone that's listening to this can go to your podcast and seek the answers that they're seeking for. That Yeah, that
Looking
makes
for.
sense. Yeah, there you go. You see, you got me. But one final thing, whether it's for podcasting, outside of podcasting, general life, being social, any kind of advice or actionable advice that someone could take today. Do you have something for them?
Yeah. Um, I would say that it's important to remember that sometimes being selfish or doing things that feel like they're selfish are actually an active service to the world around you. Because when we take care of ourselves, people don't have to help take care of us and we can help them. So if you're the kind of person who doesn't like to tend to their own garden and take care of themselves because they feel selfish, just remember that it's more selfish to ignore your own needs because because the healthier you are, the better you are to show up for other people.
I love that. I love that. Oh, now to piggyback piggyback off that. By selfish, you mean like I need my me time, not like, hey, this is mine, you can't have it. I'm not going to
Depends
share.
depends completely. I mean, if the thing that's yours, like let's say you have a car and it's a real nice car and your brother has a history of crashing his cars and you need your car to get to work. And you take your car to work and that allows you to bail your brother out every time he crashes his car. You not lending him your car isn't selfish. It's taking care of the needs of everyone by taking care of the needs of yourself.
Okay. So just like you did say, tend your own garden before. Did you say before anyone else's?
No, but that's implied, yeah. And so like I said, I mean, it's just a hack. It's a life hack where it's like, I used to be really, really worried about being perceived as selfish or doing things that felt selfish until I realized that I would be selfless right up until the moment that I crashed and couldn't take care of myself.
Huh. Interesting. I'm kind of on that, but like I don't necessarily care what other people think because what I do is all for me, but unintentionally makes others, feel accepted, feel loved, this and that. So it's like selfless, selfish, if that makes sense. No,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I'm saying is that selfish and selfless are really only defined by the perception that you're coming from.
Kara, I swear, I love this episode. It like it doesn't seem like it because I'm always like, oh, high on life, as you said, and then there's like this burnout stage, which I'm going to. I'm not gonna lie. But like I'm genuinely into hearing what you've said. It's like stuff I needed to hear. Like a lot of the things you've said is stuff I needed to hear, and hopefully, other people listening in are, taking in this information, and it's something they need to hear as well. But
I hope so too.
this right here, very big value for me, hopefully for you guys as well. But Kara, I appreciate you for being a guest on my show.
Thank
So
you for having me.
so wonderful having a pillow here. but, but thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.